I'm afraid I did not yet have time to see the recording. So I missed something.
What do we talk about? But we could probably give a quick rundown.
I know there was something you presented about digital counter or something.
We went through your widgets and their whiteboard.
Oh, yeah, that was hardly CDL. It was more hobby, unrelated CDL stuff. I mean, a lot of it's going to be used, and so I want to do a video series called Evidence Explorers, which walks through and builds up an argument map with a score on the screen as evidence is piling in from both sides of the argument. And then challenge people to provide pros and cons and then do follow-up videos. That's the theory. So I was showing them some of the graphics I developed for that, but I'm spending way too much time creating graphics as opposed to doing, and Michael's going to help me do some of the research. So hopefully that'll keep me on task.
But
you know how it is when it's fun to play.
Graphics takes time.
Yeah.
And people don't get it unless you're showing them. And
now some of these graphics though are just like fancy widgets that have no meaning because I want kind of like a futuristic looking interface. It'll be a bit confusing and I may have to take it out, but I kind of wanted it to look like, you know, like an Iron Man interface.
Did you call it a fictional user interface? Was that?
Yeah, so I found the term. I actually asked ChatGPT, what's the term for the interfaces they use in movies? And there's a Wikipedia page for FUI, fictional user interface. Yeah.
I see too many people trying to do things based on fictional user interfaces.
Yeah.
Without consideration about usability, practicality.
Well, these are just things that, you know, wiggle around and provide no value, just kind of look fancy. The type of things.
I actually had people ask me, do this UX because it looks cool. Yeah, not because I'll use it, not because it's
that's pretty
demo-driven development.
So, right. So now that's what I'm doing, but it's fun. It's so fun.
Of course it's fun. We all like, I mean, and it's not, I'm not saying it's useless, by the way. I'm being extremely down on demo-driven development.
No, I'm saying it is useless, but mine is what I'm doing. Well, I have one that's the number thing for reason score, and what I struggled with a long time is I didn't want to show an exact number because I don't want 75. It's like I don't know that it's 76, right? That's a very specific number. It's like it's in the high 70s. So now I have a number line and then just a highlight moving along it. So at no point.
Yeah. Don't go quant when all you have is qualitative. Yes.
Yeah. So that was kind of an exploration that came about. But some of the other ones, like it's just flashing lights that actually I have them counting up in binary. So if you know binary, you'll know how many minutes you are into the video. But
useful. See, it's useful.
It's not very useful. It's more distracting than useful, but anyway, that's some of the stuff we talked about. There was something else, Michael, before that. Wasn't someone else demoing something?
Yeah, we were going through Joel's ameliorate a little bit, and then you guys got talking about something specific with that.
Oh yeah, so I was talking about, you know, my hobby horse scoring. He in his system currently doesn't score relevance. Just kind of truthiness, fallenness, as far as I could tell. I think he agreed with that. So yeah, we were just kind of chatting through that.
Only pretty much Debate Map has this notion. It's quite surprising how little this is taken into account, and the more elaborate stuff from Dundee. But other than that,
did anyone have any topics we're dying to discuss today?
I could give a bit of rundown. No dramatic thing on my side. I actually had to give a I was trying to illustrate what I was trying to do. And so I made a few almost paper maquettes, right? Saying, well, this is what I expect to be able to do at some point, and just to give a better idea of what it is I'm trying to do. So I could show that very quickly. It's a few paper maquettes. It's not of
That'd
great
be-
value.
I'd find that fascinating. Yeah.
And otherwise, I've been diverted by this and that. One thing I'm thinking about, besides my core thing, which I'm still want to get back to, which is fluid interfaces. And yes, I think I've finally solved it in terms of how to do the identifiers right. And I need to speak to Danielle because I'm now thinking that I'll be able to get away with your UIDs at all levels. But there's still very much this important distinction between the UID that has temporary value because the notion will evolve. And there's how you align your private statements with the public statements. It does mean a rewrite. It's not avoidable to rewrite your statements when the concept evolves. So there'll be churn. What I'm thinking now is hopefully I'll be able to express the changes as an immutable object and the rewrite will be implied, which is not perfect, but anyway. So that's 1 second, getting it. Otherwise, yeah, that's the main thing. Otherwise, one thing that's bugging me, I've been talking a lot about the problems with bubbles and arrows. They're very useful for one case, which is systems analysis, where you actually measures flux of finite quantities. Like, for example, energy flux, like domains such as the Club of Rome model of the Earth, right? There were these different stocks and flows between stocks and feedback loops. And for that, bubbles and arrows are actually the best interface. But I've been thinking how to represent flux when the stock is not a thing or energy, or not something depletable, but more like information. And this is a great generic UX problem that, since we're talking UX, I would like to have you consider, because visualization of information flow is something that I find absolutely fascinating, right? But meanwhile, anybody else has other items on the agenda while I get out my little presentation?
No, I don't have anything on the agenda. I have something I'm mulling over, but it's not important. We can
Tell
discuss
us
it
what it is
anytime,
while
but-
Mark and Fawn's setting up his.
Yeah, I'm set up, but go ahead.
I'm reflecting on the role of the canonical debate in a post chat GPT world.
Great conversation to have. I'm perfectly willing to have it.
It's changed, at least, the tagline I approach people with these days. So I'm mulling it over still.
Okay, you want me to, you know what? I think this is important. Do you want me to get over that a bit?
If you're interested, if you're up to it.
I have some thoughts as well. So,
Okay, I
go
think
ahead.
this is good conversation starter. I think it's more important than ever. ChatGPT is a black box. Being a black box means we don't know why it proposes something. It hallucinates. We don't know the value of its proposals. The whole point of the canonical debate is to have provenance for every claim so that you can go and see, okay, why is somebody thinking that? What is the evidence? What is the quality of the evidence? What was the process to come to that conclusion? And I think making the process explicit is all the more important as we are flooded with sourceless claims. So I think it's extremely important. The other thing I'm realizing, and this is a bit of a separate thing, is people are developing very emotional relationship with ChatGPT. And I really wonder what it will do to trust. Like, people are developing, these, they're using personas and chat with ChatGPT as if it were your coach, as if it were your lover, and yada, yada, yada. And of course, relationship with chatbot is probably easier than relationship with a human in some ways. And I really, I'm scared about what it will do to human relationships. And having people engage with one another seems all the more essential. Not only mediated, but mediate if we can ground human interactions in something that has provenance. I think it's extremely useful.
So that's interesting, especially since, I've always been take the people out of
I
the
know.
canonical debate. It's
And
it's fascinating, but I see what you mean by that. I do. So yeah, in many ways, I think ChatGPT is turning the whole way I see things upside down to some degree.
fair. What are your concerns and worries? Let's go through everybody. I think it's a fascinating topic.
I had an interesting conversation with my father yesterday. Because as someone who's not in our world and seeing the chat GPT happen and all that stuff, was kind of excited about the idea of each person having their own personal coach type thing. And he gave lots of great examples. And I don't, there's interesting points where, a personal coach or whatever could be very useful. It doesn't have to be your own personal. So there's a lot of different ideas, so it's hard for me to focus on just one quickly. But imagine you have your own personal one that knows everything about you, and then you need to make quick, important decisions in life, and it knows everything about you, so it knows your perspective, and yet also has access to all the information. So it's a way to distill and help you make decisions. So of course that's very useful. And I was immediately jumping to the problems of collective consensus, right? Collective decision making and that sort of thing. I'm always worried about epistemology and all that. And he was like, no, this is like far from that. It's just, I have a legal question. I have, what's the best college for me to go to? Things like that. And what's interesting is the way one subtly affects the other, right? At what point is your personal assistant driving your life and guiding your life instead of you being in control? That's one of the problems. But
Yes.
to some degree, I could see how people would develop complete trust in their personal guide. And what's interesting is that, like, I was making all these arguments about, well, you don't know who's behind it. You don't know what corporate interests are guiding it and, controlling what you believe and handpicking sources. And he's all, well, and he started arguing for the things that we would want from canonical debate, which is full transparency, traceability. So it's not such a black box, at least where it's getting its sources and that sort of thing. And so I just started kind of wondering about where the lines are drawn between your personal assistant and the information sources, and where, so I could see you need the canonical debate to connect everybody together to one source of information, right? for all the reasons that we've
of
always wanted, which
justified
is,
information. Yes.
yeah, and making sure nothing's being hidden, there's no censorship, and all viewpoints are getting included and all that. But it's funny, a lot of times I was trying to attack his idea, and his defenses were the same defenses I make for the canonical debate. It was just an interesting exercise. So I still think that the canonical debate is needed. I just don't know if like Chat GPT or whatever, your personal assistant, is a layer on top, or if it's just that there's some universal. I mean, I guess in the end, you still need the canonical sorting of information, right? That is censorship free and all that.
It's about transparency. Are we ruled by black boxes, or are we ruled by rule of law, really? And I just put a reference to Schneier saying, oh, and now AI is going to help rewrite laws and poke holes in law. And, and it's absolutely fascinating little essay. Are we going to base our decisions on justified, reasoned information or not? And I think a lot of people will choose not to. That scares the bejesus out of me.
And here's the big problem, and it gets also to what you were hinting, or you were getting at it with your problem of people not interacting with each other, which is like I think I mentioned it before, a search engine that's private, that's for profit, like it's a subscription thing that is AI assisted, and it came before ChatGPT. It's been around for at least a year or something. Kaggle? No. Starts with an N, I think. Neva or something, I don't know. But like what it did is it gives you your search results, and it provides transparency by showing you where it got those from. It actually generates a Chat GPT type, oh, you can do this, and this is a good recipe, and this is a whatever, but it'll say, I got this from these sources. And
Elicit
then
does that, right?
Yeah. And then you could say, oh, I don't trust that resource, or I don't like that resource, and take that one out, right? And so on the one, the thing about the canonical debate is it's supposed to expose people to all arguments and all sides of a debate and all sources of information. And there's a thing where you can say, I believe that, I don't believe that, I believe in that, I don't believe in that. But when people are kind of closed into their world of their personal assistant, even if it's pulling from the canonical debate, it's what I was worrying before about layer 2 providing information bubbles, even though the underlying thing isn't. If you start saying, Neva, thank you, that's it. If you start saying, oh, that's the New York Times, nobody believes the New York Times, take that out of my search results, right? take Fox News out of my search results. It's always propaganda. Your personal assistant becomes, again, your own information bubble. And like you said, you're not even interacting with other people. You're interacting now with your personal assistant, who will never cross the lines that you haven't told it to, right? So, yeah.
How is a personal assistant different than just current Google search, if that's what it's doing, like a Bing chat or what that Perplexity AI does? Like if it's just extracting the top results and making them contextual.
If it's
How is
even
that
less work, then I think it will lead to even more trust and laziness in the first results. Because what it does is it kind of mix sources. It's not like, oh, here's this website and I have to paw through. It reduces the effort to such a degree, and you start excluding whole parts of the internet from that. I think it becomes even harder to see. You're right. Google or Bing or whatever is already a facade over all the information that's out there, right? It's a filter. but I think it goes even further when you're not having to crawl through the internet, right?
But if
Google is
in the
supposed to
end you
adapt
would,
to
when
you.
you're crawling through the internet, you extract the exact same information, like I'm still kind of failing to see how it's, if it's just more efficient at doing what you were going to do already,
Well,
what
let me
is the
put the case,
negative?
the debate of, any Twitter debates, right? That I have. And Twitter was one of my inspirations for wanting to do the canonical debate, right? Because I wanted quick responses for somebody that was fact-based. I didn't want to have to crawl through everything or whatever. I wanted to be well-founded, and here's the one piece of information that shows my viewpoint, right? Even if the canonical debate does that for you, it's connected to all sides of the debate. And you can say, but here's the preponderance of evidence, right? That you don't have to look there. Right now, without it, what am I doing? I do studies on whatever. We'll go to the immigration thing, or I can't remember what the most recent thing was, but legal cases against Donald Trump. And I start pawing through, and I will always come across multiple viewpoints as I'm doing that. I'm kind of looking for the results that support my view, but as I do it, I start reading through them and seeing where they also refute my view. So I'm vaguely coming into contact with opposing viewpoints when I have to do that work. If you do Chat GPT and you've kind of pre-selected kind of your sources, you say, well, is Trump in a lot more legal peril than any other president, or which president had the most legal issues or cost the most, whatever. Then it assembles it from your pre-chosen things and gives you a ready-made response that may not be totally factually based, right? And you didn't have to come into contact with the rest.
It seems like the key point you're saying there is, if you've already chosen your sources, it's going to give you what you're looking for. But again, I just feel like that's already what people do. I'm only going to look at Fox News versus MSNBC or what have you. I think people are already in those lanes. And so I still have not seen, if it's just enhancing what they're doing already, what is it?
You're not
How is
totally,
that the negative?
you're not totally wrong, but if you look at, I see a lot of people in Fox and MSNBC taking time to contradict one another. If at a certain level of abstraction, you lose that. Like, okay, this is the worldview of X, and it won't even mention, and here's why Y is wrong.
In my general experience, with ChatGPT as well, when I ask questions that aren't specifically focused, it will generally give me both sides. It'll say, well, here's kind of some of the reasons, and here's also reasons why, or
That's true.
possible sources otherwise.
Yeah.
And,
no, it does do that.
But I'm definitely not disagreeing on the fact that there needs to be some type of grounding for language models. I think that's definitely come across a lot, for sure.
And this is exactly one of those cases where I saw my father defending my point of view from the canonical debate perspective for this idea, which is exactly what you said. I've always said that the canonical debate is needed because it presents it'll present all the different sides, and you have to come into contact. And with these Chat GPT like assistants, they can do that. They're designed to do that. And here's from different sources, and you have to look at it, and it presents them in a whatever, I don't know if balanced is right, but in some sort of manner that at least lets you see those different things. And my argument to him is exactly the argument people always make to me. There's a total role reversal where it's, it will necessarily have the feature of exclude these sources. It'll present those things, and people will say, yeah, but I don't like that. That's a crap source. Exclude that source, because it's a feature people want to need, right? And people who are coming into a subject new, or people who are young and growing up with this, will start out with more of a blank slate and seeing sides. People who are older and more opinionated will immediately start cutting out. And, so, anybody who's got a well-formed opinion on something is a lot harder to convince even with evidence, right? But my argument for the canonical debate has always been, yeah, but this isn't to convince those people. It's more to train people over time. It's the impact it'll have over time on the way people acquire information. And so maybe adults are lost, our lost generation, but the next generations will be a lot. And that's the same argument. You're right. I agree with that. I think it's a problem that you will probably be able to exclude whole sources. Whereas with the canonical debate, it's claim by claim and argument by argument, and the source doesn't matter. I mean, the source matters as an argument of whether this claim is good or not, right? So it's the granularity there that I think bothers me a little bit.
That does make sense. Yeah. If the canonical debate turns out to be what we want it to be, and people use that as their source for their LLMs, then that's great. That's what we are going for. Yeah.
Or some sort of underlying, fact, not fact, because again, it's disputed facts, claims, anchor to everything else, right? It's still should pull from discussions everywhere, but
we want the next chat to have hyperlinks to the CDL for whatever it says.
Well, and you have that already. Like if the CDL existed, the canonical debate list existed currently with ChatGPT plugins, you could just plug that in and say, ask your question, and here's your source and references. So I'm pretty excited for what the future is.
You can't do that because the thing with, you can only give so much context, right? And that's I'm going to make a quasi-Marxist argument. The thing with language models is they democratize use of AI, but the creation of the model is still a capital-intensive operation. And tuning by most accounts doesn't work that well. And that means whoever creates the model there's an enormous asymmetry of power in creating versus using the models. And you cannot give it that much context. You can give it, 16K? Or, there's a very small window of here's the context that you can use to go further. And that means you cannot point it at the canonical debate and say, use that, unfortunately.
Well, I guess I was using a semantic search to take whatever your query is, to search for that, pull out the relevant, and then give that as context.
I certainly would want outclaims in CDL or whatever to have pre-calculated embedding so we can do embedding search. Sure, I'm all for that. I don't know if it's true of ChatGPT embeddings, and I'd like to make the experiment, but on earlier large language models, I noticed that the embedding between a sentence and its negation were actually very close in cosine distance. Just saying.
I don't know enough to so what do you mean the embedding between the sentence and its negative? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. If you take a sentence, large language models are useful. Then you calculate the embedding. That's a vector. And then you say language models are not useful. And that's the same sentence with a not. And you calculate the embedding, and that's another vector. That vector is not terribly different. So there's no one vector axis that will let you go from one statement to its opposite, which makes sense.
Well, why does that matter in this context?
It makes sense if you want to distinguish truth from falsehood, or relevant from irrelevant. It's cause and effect. I'm exaggerating a bit, but if you do similarity search and you find contradictory statements in the same neighborhood, You can't use that to think about causal relationship, because obviously if A causes B, you cannot have not A causes B. If it cannot distinguish A and B, how will it know to distinguish A causes B from not A causes B?
I guess I'm still trying to understand how, and it probably does, it just beyond me, of if I'm asking in the situation or the use case of I'm asking a question and it's pulling that question out into a vector and using that vector to search the canonical debate to bring back, you know, the 50 pages of context, and using that context to then ask the question of the LLM. I
see what you're saying.
And then it'll reference, okay, well, here's the context and here's my answer is related to this context. And I just posted that link in chat of the update of how they're now trying to take the response text and the response source and compare them and say if they're actually matched to combat hallucinations, which is pretty amazing, I think.
That may work.
Because if their answer isn't close at all to the source, you're like, okay, well, this is probably hallucination. But if it is, it's like, well, no, you can see the sources right here.
But what I'm saying is it could give you a conclusion that's the opposite of what's in the text, and it may not know the difference.
But that's fine, because if you have the source right there, you can see. Yeah.
That's assuming people read.
But then again, that goes back to my argument that that's no different than what they're doing now. If I Google something, go to the first result, and the claim is this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine, without actually caring about who they sourced, how they got that information.
That is fair. The current situation is problematic. If that's the point, I won't disagree with that. How is ChatGPT making it worse? I think it makes people are aware that there's dissenting opinions, and that Google search a bit longer will give you somebody saying the opposite. In the case of ChatGPT, they're like, okay, ChatGPT says this. Do I need to look further? That's the computer's answer. I'm sure there's a lot of people who will think the computer is right and won't look beyond that. And it's more tempting than when you know it's another fallible human at the other end who wrote this.
That's fair enough, yeah.
That's purely imputation on my part. Carl, do you have something, or Bentley?
I didn't want to miss today, but I am not present enough to contribute directly to the conversation just because I'm dealing with a deadline from today.
Fair.
Yeah. What was the context I missed, though, that we're talking about how useful LLMs are for the canonical debate project? Or is it more specific?
Do the existence of LLM impact the need? Like, how do you pitch the CDL? And since some of what it tries to do seems to be, and I don't think is, but has the LLMs give the illusion of filling that need.
Oh, it's critical.
Right.
Because
yeah, I think that
are owned by people. Yeah, they're owned by entities with lots of resources. There's no democratic process right now. A healthy, canonical debate could potentially provide feedback and context for what this magic oracle is shooting out. Yeah.
I think the problem is I'm feeling like it's become a harder sell now. I think you were right in saying that it looks like a replacement for the canonical debate when it's not even close, right? But it becomes a harder sell because people will see less and less the need for it.
Some people will see the need, but very few.
Yeah, well, okay, so there were two important benefits to the canonical debate, right, that were selling points. One is collapsing all the information that's out there into one single place and giving you easy access. And ChatGPT can do that better, at this point. And the other is censorship-free, full transparency, helping people see all sides and all that stuff, which, yeah, fully trusty, the fully trustworthy angle is almost all that's left. Complete and completely trustworthy. Yeah.
Well, about the synthesizing info point, don't forget that, well, I shouldn't say don't forget, not like I really know, but I think ChatGPT and other systems are currently pretty limited in how they can synthesize current information. I think they just started letting them search the web, but I don't know how much better they are at that than a really informed user.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
when there's sense making to be done. Sorry, yeah, that was my point.
yeah, I think, although there's a difference between what it really does well and what people perceive that it does well. So I agree with what Tim's saying, is that people get the feeling that when they ask it a question, they're getting a good overview summary of everything, but really what they're doing is getting summary of some of it. I don't, in my searches and stuff like that, the kind of minority opinion and the edge claims that could be true in some cases are not generally coming up. So you don't get the full kind of spectrum and the experience that I've had so far. But then being kind of black box-ish, you know. And the other thing is that if we do include synthesis in the canonical debate lab, which I don't know, Tim, where you are right now, whether we want to document mostly the exact claims that people are making, or more like Mark Antoine's doing, where we want to continually rephrase these things to make them clear and more accurate. It's like, in my experience, those final sentences we come up with, no one has ever uttered on the internet. The language models don't have the data to learn from to do that yet.
They still manage to do amazingly well, I must say. The ability to synthesize is staggering.
Well, the ability to, yeah, no, it's great. I'm just saying that, well, because there's a lot of analysis and synthesis on the internet, but the
Yep.
type of analysis and synthesis we're doing is very rare.
No, that's true.
And I mean, if we had a huge corpus of it and we trained the system on it, I think it could do a lot to assist in that, but I don't think it's been done. I mean, not a lot, people have stumbled on it. I was just listening to a Sam Harris podcast where he had two people talking about AI risks, and just hearing these three intellectuals completely talk past each other for an hour was fascinating.
Yeah,
They all were trying to make three completely separate points and not listening, and just kind of like, it's like, oh gosh, I need a an argument
Right.
map, because he's putting points over here and he's putting points over here, and it's like,
So
anyways.
Early days in the canonical debate, back when we were modeling claims, right? There were different perspectives on how to model, and one of them is the sentence the claim, right? And I would take the totally opposite perspective, that I think the claim is a unique key that represents the concept that I still want to design, right? And in the middle was always the idea that, this claim could be expressed lots of different ways. There are different ways to express the same sentence.
Yeah.
There are
Some being more or
different
less
temperatures of the way you say it. It's debatable whether these two sentences really are the same concept, all that, right, are all discussions we've had. And this makes it clearer and clearer to me, or it reinforces my belief. What we need to focus on is the unique key underlying these claims. and natural language processing is going to be able to pull things together and say, you know, is this a pair? Do these match? Yeah. Yeah, I guess just the concept or the modeling of the concept is separate from the way you express it. I don't know.
Well, one thing, just to get back to the power analysis, there's more and more evidence that there's work to sabotage language models or big learning in general by introducing bias in large language models, and that it can be done deliberately. It can be done in a way that's hard to detect because it's only triggered in certain precise conditions, stuff like that. It's a big deal. The question of the asymmetry of knowledge. But now what I'm thinking also is if too many people trust AI, and AI is bendable, then how much do I trust the collective intelligence anymore? I still do basically, but it does reduce my trust in humans. If humans rely too much on AI and AI is capturable, it does. AI is basically inserting itself in the middle of all human interactions. And I really fear what this will do to society as a whole.
So this was, you know, something I would talk about way back when, which was when Google started getting smart enough to find events near you and suggest them. It was like, you know, how long until Google's telling your friends to go somewhere and then telling you your friends are going somewhere and starts controlling your schedule, right? It's a lot more subtle when you have your assistant. Yeah, I mean, I already don't trust people, but I think I think, or at least I don't trust people's good sense. I don't trust people to to care or use it. But I think we're going to have the pattern we've already seen in trusting news sources and trusting fact checkers and trusting social platforms is going to propagate, going to continue into the world of AI, which is, oh, I don't trust Google AI, right? I only use DuckDuckGo AI. I only use, you know, 4chan AI or whatever. But essentially you will get sort of, you know, who fact checks the fact checkers type discussions when people come into contact with each other. Yep. Right.
Very, very fascinating. Yeah, no, I remember we had this discussion about chat platforms, and now it will be, where do you get your information from? Well, it is already that, right? I mean, there, Michael is right. I mean, there's already, it's impossible for the MSNBC crowd to talk to the Fox crowd because there's no common point of reference. There's no common
well, what's
reality.
interesting there, yeah, I mean, I still find common points, right? Because what I have to do is learn what are trusted sources for the other side, and then I go look for things that prove my point that they'll have to listen to, right? But it gets hard. It gets harder and harder to find those things. And primary sources are the best place. But really, but part of the impact is primary sources.
You make it your work. I'm saying very few people develop that skill.
Sure.
Becoming a translator and
yeah. So the whole other angle to this discussion is provenance, right?
Provenance is key, and
from
this
your
is
sources.
and this is why I never believed in decontextualizing the claims beyond the point, because claims only have as much value as their provenance and methodology for evidence. And what I believe strongly is getting people to think about, why do you know that? How did you arrive at that belief? And unless we get people thinking at that level, and I know it's a big ask, but I think it's necessary.
Well, I was always, I think our difference on opinion there is that, yeah, there you go, very good. Our difference of opinion there is that I don't think the claim should be couched from the source that you got the claim from, but evidence.
That's different. That's different.
Yeah,
but it needs to be linked. It needs to be linked to the original source, so you know, this was this person with those interests and those. It matters. It matters
when
but
you're
yes.
trying to interpret the thing. Yeah, when you're it matters when you're interpreting, I guess. I don't know if we want to go down the whole rabbit trail of how to guarantee provenance. There's one other totally different area of impact that I see from all of this, which is I haven't had time to code my ideas for the canonical debate, and I'm now at the point where I think it would be a total waste of time because anything I could write now, 2 years from now, I could write by just saying a sentence and having it write for me, right? I'm now at a point where I'd rather, it's the rocket ship going to Proxima Centauri or whatever. I'd rather wait for the faster rocket than put my hands to code on any ideas today. If it were my job, I would. You work with this, but I don't. So
there was a great article about AI in education, asking why do we write, and we don't write to display knowledge. We write because that's the way we integrate knowledge, and it's a way to wrestle with the pros and cons ourselves as we write. So producing the product is not the point. And that way, people who get too much help from an AI assistant are depriving themselves of the process of writing. And I think it's the same with the process of coding. There's a process of what are the pros and cons. And I agree that there's so much boilerplate that, hey, we'd love to delegate. But there's a wrestling with what are the forces and balances of this model versus that model that I still want to wrestle with. It's like
model design would still be, it would probably be where I focus on my effort, model and interface, and how do we make it do
I agree that code is less than it was. Yes.
Yeah. But that's actually inspiring for me, because now it's like, I actually think it could get built, right? As the AI assistants start taking over the coding work. When I finally put my mind to it, I can get out a prototype pretty quick, and we can. Yeah.
Okay. I said I'd show you a few paper prototypes. Let's do that quickly. This was shown to the Collaborathon people. Share screen, this one, a few days ago. So basically, I'm just telling this is where I am at. I've got data models underway. Conceptual model is pretty much there at this point. This is the goal. You've heard me say that 25 times. I won't go into it.
If you start sharing already.
Oh, damn it.
Good one.
Apologies.
There we go.
Yes. The goals, I don't want to spend time over it. The definitions and assumptions. This is more, again, you've heard me say that many times. Belief is a statistic. Evidence has different rules. Interpretation. This is more, again, you've heard this, but it's worth going into. Identifiers for concepts follow have to follow the evolution of a concept's definition. When we add elements of definition to a concept, I think the identifier needs to change because it's not the same concept, basically, as it evolves. And that means please use opaque identifiers because nobody can claim ownership. Like if you say, oh, I'm using this term and this is the word I'm using for it, and this is, I coined the term, this creates battle for namespace. And no, let's use UUIDs. Nobody cares. And there's personal reference combined with immutable state. It's not the clearest. I'm referring to my version at time t of the definitions, and that's immutable in a way. It's like I made this claim at this point to this immutable definition. On the other hand, the underlying definition I'm using in my definition might itself change, so the ID will change. So it's not immutable that way. It will get rewritten as the component concepts evolve. And that means the claims are always rewritten. And I think that's absolutely necessary. Track divergence for massive claim rewrite. That's more when the collective has diverged. Then we need to know, okay, people really have identified this ambiguity collectively. So I have to review all my claims to take into account that fork in the concept. The state is a kind of position in a dynamic, now I say partial lattice, because I don't think it'll be total. It's too much work. It's not absolutely necessary. It's on demand. But it still defines equivalence classes of sets of definition elements. And that's what claims are made of. It's saying, well, these definition elements or these, and that's someone asserts, and that's a claim, that the extension of those two different intentions is the same, or subset or whatever. But basically what we do is set theory on equivalence class of these sets. Composing definition elements given a super category and two non-empty distinctions, there's basically 5 cases. That's just set theory. Identity, containment, overlap, disjoint. And we can ask those questions. Also, we can ask, is it a cover? Is the union exhaustive over the super category? Stories. I still think stories are important. Rules are economical for communication, but stories are what the mind thinks with much more than rules. But basically, story is evidence that a point, basically a position in the set, is populated. And then the meet and join would be on demand when the categories are salient. Equivalence of meet. When you have many meets, you can, and they are said to be equivalents, that gives you a join operator. That's a bit obscure. I'll have to explain that better, but I need to do it formally. I'm trying to rush through the idea. So here somebody's writing a sentence and we're focusing on the word concept, and oh, here are 3 possible meanings that have been identified and named locally, like probably using a dictionary here. And this is where, well, if you look at plan, here are features, if you will, of the plan definition of concept. And here are features of the abstract idea definition of concept. So it's got a different feature signature when you're choosing one or the other concept. And so you say at this point, okay, I'm choosing this one. I'm saying it's an abstract idea in my claim. I'm enriching my claim, and it's got this. And this is all at the personal level. And then if I'm reading that, I will have the reader identifies an ambiguity. So these are the known, like, this is what you personally put as markers for this concept. and somebody reads that and sees the markers and say, well, I'd like to add a distinction. And here I'm saying, well, do concepts include propositions as or is just entities? And so I'm giving label if true, label if false. So this is requesting a distinction. And it's a lot of cases, but many cases are actually simple. And what's really important is the abstract idea could correspond to either branch or both, or the union. And when you've done that, the person who had the original statement will, oh, this distinction is being proposed on concept in the sense of abstract idea, and this is what the person entered. And here are your statements. There were the original markers, and you made this statement about concepts, and you in the sense of abstract idea. So now, would you like to redefine your notion of concept, always with generic topic, always with entity reference, always with proposition, as proposed here? Do you want to do it case by case, or do you want to introduce your own distinction, your own vocabulary, and use the new concept? That doesn't mean you're, and probably that would be another UX element. That doesn't mean you're accepting the term, but you're saying, I generally meant it in this way throughout when I was using this term. I meant it more in that branch or that branch. I may still keep calling it concept. That's not important. And then some discussion about what are the API, what do I expect the API to do for me? This, let's take more time when it's more definite. Sorry, I'll give you the, where's the chat? Thank you. This is the presentation. But basically, what you expect here, listening, like, is this widely believed? Is there a new incoming distinction? But the really important one here is updating. When you say, when you propose a new concept, when you propose a new distinction, propose a new example, when you update your personal definition and then you republish your claims, or at least publish a claim update. And here I'm repeating myself, it seems, but it's also part of the update saying, I think defining it in this way and that way are equivalent, or this is a subcase of that, and so on. Here, there's still work to do. I don't think I can reduce those cases, but I think many of them are covered by the idea of distinction. So maybe I will manage to fuse the interface here. Still working on that. But I wanted to make it more concrete with these screens, what I see as the process of I'm receiving a distinction and what can I do with it on the claims I've already recorded in my personal database, and what's the impact? What are the actions I can take? That was the main screen I wanted to show. And that's slightly rushed, but
yeah, we'll have to pause the video
and
when it goes up.
I shouldn't have done it so much at the end. Maybe we need to unpack a lot of things and go into
Marc-Antoine,
details.
can you also post the link to that presentation in the CDL?
Yes.
Slack.
Absolutely.
So we can lose it in Slack as well as in.
Tim, I have a question for you.
Yep.
About, oh, it's for Tim, sorry. That's okay. Or unless, are you done, Marc-Antoine? Sorry, I apologize.
No, it's fine. Unless you have questions to me, but yeah, go ahead.
This one is just about the white paper. How do you feel about it currently? How much? I remember once back a while ago, you're like, it needs to be updated. And the reason I ask is I did that whole Twitter thing of taking all the sections and putting them into tweets. And I'm thinking about diving into that and starting releasing some tweets. And just wondering how you feel about that, if you want any changes done first.
Well, I don't know if I have time to, but the first thing is I think ChatGPT has forever altered the problem statement. Um, so that's a new revision that would have to happen. I think that's the part that has stood the test of time the most was the whole problem statement, and it's what resonated most with people. And unfortunately, now it's going to have to be rewritten. But I think maybe it's too early to rewrite too until I start seeing more of how people are adapting to the new ideas. As far as the second half, which is the solution, a lot of it is still relevant, but a lot of it isn't. Especially, the design of what I call the context. Yeah, there's a lot that would need to be rethought. As for posting on Twitter, if you just say, oh, here was the when was it written, 2018, 2017, something, perspective on this, it requires revision. But if you just couch it in that, the point, even if you state it all wrong, what's interesting is if people read it at all, if they think something's wrong, they'll engage, which is fine. Oh, this is totally irrelevant. You know what? You're right. What do you think it should be? You get people to engage. What is that? I forget whoever's rule that if you want the right answer to something, post the wrong one.
Yeah.
Hey, and Michael, if you want access to the official CDL Twitter account, we can also do that.
Good to know. Thank you. I'll think about that.
Folks, do we have a official CDL Mastodon account now? We should.
We
Ooh,
don't.
No, we don't. We should.
Yes, just saying.
I mean, the person who said it volunteers is what No, I'm just playing. That's a good idea.
On another note, Tim, I agree totally with what you're saying. On the other hand, I feel you've done the work. Because this article on information security, I think, was a reframing of the problem. It doesn't address ChatGPT directly, but so much of it is relevant to ChatGPT.
Right. I wish I had a good habit of just writing smaller things whenever they cross my mind, because that's all it would need is applying that to ChatGPT and saying, look, the extension of that article is with ChatGPT, you are going to have custom made helpers, assistants, right?
For writing this information, especially, yes.
And you're going to have both sides. You're going to have models built. I mean, here's in fact, now that you bring that up, here's a fascinating idea. What if, because the hybrid warfare thing is about finding your tribe and then creating narratives, right? What if creating narratives suddenly becomes a lot more concrete an activity? Where essentially this is our official avatar for our position. This ChatGPT synthesizes everything we believe. If you have any questions, go ask it. If you need it to write something for you, have it write something for you. And you have top-down thinkers.
There's a part of me that loves the idea, and the part of me is like, another intermediated human relationship. Ouch. Like the solution seems to always be substitute AI for humans. And that scares the heck out of me. But I agree. I mean, I do see the value of that.
I mean, even politics, even with a non-cynical view, political parties and organizations hand out talking points all the time.
Yep.
When you're interviewed by somebody on the news, here's what you say. When you're asked about this, here's what you say. Here's our official position. Now, here's a ChatGPT to help you write things, right?
Or let's just have the journalist interview ChatGPT. Or let's just have ChatGPT interview ChatGPT.
Yeah, no, yeah, I had a discussion. Yeah, I told you last time about somebody who I had this discussion with. Well, you're creating intentionally Chat GPT as a represented point of view, so you can discuss it with it
But
civilly.
but I also see the value of that. Part of me is profoundly discouraged, and part of me sees the value. I mean, we do want
That's what's so dangerous, right? Because it is.
totally.
If it weren't a mix, if you're all bad, nobody would do it.
Well, look at the reactions to the 6-month moratorium letter. It's very interesting. I don't think 6-month moratorium would change anything, to be honest. I think it will
Well,
take
I haven't
much more
even
than
read it. Yeah, I haven't read it, but my first take is this makes absolutely no sense from a game theory perspective.
I know I've
It's not
heard
gonna
that
happen.
argument from someone else. I'm amused. I think you're right. I still think what they're asking for, and I totally agree, is let's stop application and deployment, which we can totally do, until we have spent time regulating, like having collective conversation and thinking about rules and thinking about guidelines and guardrails. Because that conversation has not happened. Now, can it happen in 6 months? We haven't been able to have a good conversation about, say, climate change in the last 6 decades, but it's still worth trying. I think people are seeing the importance of AI, how it can rip through human fabric, and I'm so annoyed by the AGI people. And what if it gets intelligent and wants to replace us? It's like, a dumb AI can do plenty damage. And we're seeing it right now. It doesn't have to have intentionality. It doesn't have to be smart. It doesn't have to do. Right now, what it's doing to the social fabric is plenty scary enough without reaching AGI levels. I don't believe even GPT-4 is intelligent, for the record. Though that's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I was just gonna say, the not releasing itself fails the game theory test, because first of all, Microsoft is gonna stop now that Bing is finally back in people's mouths, right? You think they're gonna pull back? I know a lot of people who are building new startups all around creating an interface for these tools.
Clearly.
Are they gonna wait 6 months?
No, they won't. No, but I think it's precisely about deployment. I mean, a lot of these startups, are they ready to release now? Maybe some of them, maybe some of them not.
Yes. I'm
Yeah,
already
yes.
seeing, yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
No, it won't happen. You're right. I mean, but I think the real call is let's have that conversation. And that I'm totally in favor of.
Sure. Yes, agreed. Yeah. But I get the feeling it's going to go the same way as the regulating social media discussion has gone. Yeah.
As some people on social media are saying precisely, oh no, the genie's out of the bottles. We can't put it back in the bottle, says people who have spent a lot of time getting the genie out of the bottle. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Yes.
I'm as if, well, let's say that being a Cassandra is certainly I've got job security. Too bad I'm not earning as a Cassandra, because my goodness, it's dire predictions are a dime a dozen right now.
Well, we're kind of past our hour. We
Yes,
can always continue. There's no limit, but there's also no limit.
it's a good idea to stop. Yes.
Well, great, everyone. See you next week. Tim, if there's a time and a day that works better for you, let us know. You were
Yeah, I
complaining
just know
about
that
never
the
being able to make it,
Wednesdays right now are not a good time for me.
but this time works a little better.
Fridays are better. Wednesdays, I'm like driving at this time.
The reality is we could not find a time that worked for everybody, so that's why we picked 2 times.
That's true.
Which is fine, and
Every other week's
if
probably
I'm
pretty good for you right now, anyways.
yeah, it's also fine. I mean, the measure of it, if it's fine or not, is if there are different people coming on Wednesdays. If it's a subset of this group, then maybe we should keep it Friday. But if it's a different mix on Wednesdays, that's a good thing.
We might throw out another poll at some point. Cool. Well, thanks, everyone, and I guess we'll see you on Wednesday if you can make it.
All right, thanks, guys.
Ciao,
Thanks.
ciao.
We'll see ya.